Okay, let's wrap up Chapter 3. If you're in my 8 o'clock, Section 501, didn't finish these last few slides. I apologize for that. I didn't have any trouble getting it done in the next sections, but I evidently spent a little too long on some of the earlier slides. So let's get this knocked out. We had, in the lecture today, looked at the three different spectrums of power and economy and order. And as it's shown up at the top of half of this slide, it's not too hard to sort of pick out the typical positions that a conservative or that a liberal, left being liberal, right being conservative, would normally take on each of those two public society and public economy scales or continuums. But this is not fixed in stone. Just because somebody defines themselves one way doesn't mean that when we actually look at them on these various continuums that they will be exactly as you would expect them to be, or that they would be exactly like you. There are some assumptions that go along with those labels, though, of conservative and liberal. So usually a conservative is expected to highly value social order and economic efficiency. And a liberal is going to sort of reverse those, highly value social freedom and economic equality. If instead you run into a group of individuals who highly value social order and economic equality, you may end up finding out that you've run into a group of Hispanics, because quite often the Hispanic voters will sort of have one foot in the Democratic camp and one foot in the conservative camp, just based upon the way that their value systems tend to drop. So going back to conservative, what does that mean about that particular position on order and efficiency? They fully are for the government regulating social choices. They want control over those issues of social choices, but they quite often want the government to be hands-off when it comes to the economic choices. This is consistent with what we've heard before. And when they are confronted with economic inequality, the expectation of a conservative is to, it's not that they have no sympathy, but sort of the common theme is that can only help you to a point, because this is sort of a natural consequence of just who you are and who I am. Where it comes to the bumper sticker for the liberals, highly valuing social freedom and economic equality, not wanting the government to be restricting social choices at all, but liberals tend to want the government to be involved quite a bit in regulating the market in order to be able to protect the common man and woman from the evils of a market that is out of control, such as extremely large banks that make extremely risky bets at the cost of everyone's 401k when the market crashes and the bubble bursts. It's not that liberals don't value private goods, but they tend to do so to a lesser degree, because they really want the market to ultimately work for everybody, not just for the few that are at the top. Okay, libertarian and populist, these are sort of different blends of those continuums. I'd love to talk more with you about this, but we'll do it offline. These will not be tested on the exam. Okay, so what about political culture in Texas? We've talked a lot about it. Let's sort of pull some of those things together. We expect Texans to be individualistic on economic issues, self-advancement being at the fore, traditionalistic on social issues, don't rock the boat. It's not that we don't want government or that we don't want government involved, but we want them involved regulating and fixing and hands-off on issues that are pretty much the opposite of what the liberals often want. Conservatism has been around in Texas since pretty much our birth. But you need to realize that Democrats in Texas tend to be a lot more conservative than Democrats, for example, perhaps in California, certainly in New England. It's all a matter of degree. And so here in Texas, we should feel a lot more warm towards even our Democratic brethren than we do against perhaps the Democratic Party as a whole. You're going to find that Texas conservatives minimize the role of government, except in the areas where they want government there, such as controlling issues about abortion, for example. You're going to find Texas conservatives stressing the role of individualism, especially when it comes to business owners, and especially large business owners. You're going to find them not wanting to seek out academics to be a member of their economic advisory councils. They're much more interested in what the hands-on business people have learned and what it is that they think is going to work. And ultimately, you'll see them advocate for lots of government involvement whenever they feel that there's a liberal value or a liberal idea that needs to be the state needs to be protected from, or that needs to be driven out. And we'll talk a lot more about that, about some of the things that the governor has said and that the legislature has done over the last several months and years with respect to that. So I'll give you lots of examples as we go forward into the legislative and the executive. Okay, this term and the one follow it are academic theoretical terms. This is not a term that you're going to see tossed around in politics much. Even the Democrats don't use this in public. Social Darwinism is a theory that states that not everyone is created equal, and that because of different levels of ability and different levels of energy and effort that are put forward, that some people are more worthy and deserving of the rewards that they reap. And those who do not reap those rewards, there must be a reason for that, and that they are therefore unworthy and undeserving. This is a pretty harsh kind of viewpoint. It actually was put forward by certain political circles in the late 19th and 20th centuries. There's not much credence given to it today, but when Dr. Tucker looks at the policies, the social policies that you see in Texas with respect to jobs and with respect to health care and poverty programs and multiple other things, many of which we'll look at, he really sees the shadow of this sort of thrown across the policy. You'll have a chance to make your own judgment on that as we go forward, but that's what we mean by social Darwinism. Of course, Darwinism engenders the idea of survival of the fittest, and so that's why it's called that. Laissez-faire economic doctrine. Laissez-faire is a French term. It basically means hands off, let it be. And I say pseudo laissez-faire because we are not completely hands-off here, but there's something that folks that are in favor of capitalism are often in favor of. So this is going to be consistent with the individualistic political culture type. And this is the government not interfering with business, or to a minimal degree. So the government acting as the blocker for the running back, promoting that good market health. The interesting thing that's pointed out here is that when laissez-faire interacts with social Darwinism, the result is what's often called trickle-down theory. Trickle-down theory is a economic theory that is ascribed to by many economists, but there are also many economists who do not. So it's one of those big debates that goes on within economics. The idea here is that laissez-faire means that the rich can get richer. And social Darwinism says only they deserve to be able to do that, but that doesn't mean that everyone can't sort of benefit from those folks at the top continuing to win. So we take care of those capitalists, we take care of the rich and to the business owners and these other folks, and they in turn make our economy much more stronger. They expand their hiring. They may even give some job raises. In other words, they're able to benefit the economy as a whole very broadly and benefit certain individuals very specifically, especially those that get a raise or get a job. And so Texas is known as being very business friendly, and we really want to take good care of our businesses, but as you're going to see, we really in some cases have really no interest in providing a cash payment to somebody who's having a hard time. And we believe that we have very good reasons for that. So this idea of floating all boats is the same thing as trickle-down theory. So in other words, you take care of those at the top, they generate a lot more wealth, and in the process of doing that, everybody ends up being better off. Now, as I said, there's a lot of economists who do not hold to this theory, and so you can be your own judge as we go forward. We are going to be talking a lot about Texas social policy, especially as we go towards the end of the semester. And you'll be able to sort of make your own judgment as to whether or not you consider Texas to sort of be, stingy, relative to the other states. Okay, so we don't need to worry so much about these charts here. These are three charts that actually look at the same data in sort of three different ways, showing the strengths and the weaknesses of each one. In the classroom, what I did was gave everybody this opportunity to sort of answer this question: can we use the percent conservative measure to define the percentage of Republicans? The answer ends up being, well, it really depends upon how the composite measure was defined, but probably not. Conservative is, as we've seen, is sort of in the eyes of the beholder. Are we talking about socially conservative? Are we talking about economically conservative? Are we talking about both? How are we measuring that? You can be a conservative and you can call yourself a Democrat. So the two are not synonymous. They may end up being pretty close depending upon how it's measured, but ultimately you really can't tell. Percent conservative is a composite measure where somebody's gone in and figured out what they want to measure in order to be able to gen up that number. And Republicans, even that is difficult to measure. How are you going to do that? Are you a card-carrying Republican? I would dare say that most Republicans are not. Did you vote for Republicans straight ticket the last three elections? What's going to be the criteria to actually say, hey, yes, you are indeed a Republican? Is it just self-identification? That's usually how the question is done. So how do you label yourself? So just more cautions about measures here. Past the point where we need to do anything more. So the country's growing more conservative. We'll talk more about that. That's what I wanted to get you for exam one, and thanks for your time. We'll see you on Monday.